Making mistakes is never much fun, especially when you're performing in front of an audience. So it's pretty natural to become super critical of ourselves on stage and spend much of the performance evaluating and critiquing how we sound in real time, instead of focusing on the bigger picture of the music itself. But how many of our mistakes do people in the audience actually notice? Or more to the point, how many of our imperfections do other musicians in the audience notice? A Yale study provides some insights that might surprise you. In this 1996 study, 10 Yale piano majors were given an hour to learn and record 4 short pieces. That's not a ton of time, of course, so understandably, the pianists' performances were nowhere near perfect. And altogether, the recordings of the Chopin D-flat major prelude had 380 total note errors in it, meaning the pianists either played a wrong note, left out a note, or played a note where there was none written in the score. To find out how many of these note errors would be noticed by other musicians, 8 Yale undergraduate piano majors, all of whom were familiar with the piece and 2 of whom had studied the piece, then listened to the recordings with blank, unmarked copies of the score. They were asked to circle any wrong, missing, or added notes that they heard in the recording. And if they couldn't quite figure out what happened but knew that something was off, circling a group of notes was okay too. So if you had to guess, what percentage of these 380 note errors do you think the pianists noticed? 50%? 80%? 10%? Well, here's what happened. Of the 380 errors, the 8 pianists, as a group, detected only 38%. That is 143 out of 380 errors. On an individual level, the pianist with the keenest ear for wrong notes only managed to catch 22% of the note errors. And on the flip side, the lowest scoring pianist caught only 7% of the errors. So what are we to do with this? Well, admittedly, one limitation of this particular study is that pianists do play a ton of notes. So it's very understandable how a listener, even another pianist with a copy of the score, would be likely to miss a lot of note errors, especially if they occur in the inner voices and don't clash with the other notes being played. So yes, note errors on a different instrument certainly might stand out a little more. But I think this study is about more than just note errors. I think the larger idea is that we tend to be much more sensitive to the imperfections in our playing than others are, even other musicians. For instance, consider how many times you've listened back to a recording of a performance of your own, months or years afterwards, and realize how minor or unnoticeable most errors are on the recording, even though they seemed pretty catastrophic under your ear at the time. The bigger problem is that directing all of our energy and focus to evaluating our performance, beating ourselves up, and feeling embarrassed about mistakes and imperfections is kind of wasted on aspects of our playing that most folks won't even notice. Meanwhile, it takes away valuable mental bandwidth that could be used to bring out and highlight all the details and important music stuff that we actually want an audience to hear. So the next time you have an opportunity to perform for an audience, remind yourself that the mistakes you make are probably much less distracting to the listener than it feels in the moment. And that the bigger issue is not the mistakes themselves, but how dwelling on these mistakes is what will likely prevent you from playing your best. The good news is that if you'd like to get better at staying in control of your attention in moments like these, this is something you can practice in advance by recording yourself in tiny doses, where you practice turning off your inner critic and devoting all of your attention to the aspects of the music that are most important in each phrase, whether that's sound, dynamics, voicing, phrasing, articulation, character, mood, and the list goes on. In other words, be intentional about when you're practicing and when you're practicing performing. When you're practicing, practice. Listen critically, analyze, and nitpick away. But when you're performing or doing performance practice, just perform. Let go, trust your preparation, and focus on what you want to say, not how well you're saying it. The recording is there so you can listen critically, evaluate, and nitpick to your heart's content afterwards. As the artist Sister Corita Kent once noted, don't try to create and analyze at the same time. They're different processes. Legendary violin pedagogue Ivan Galamian once wrote that we tend to neglect performance practice and that we usually do too little, too late. When I was a student at Juilliard, I assumed that performance practice just meant running through my repertoire, maybe in front of a family member or a roommate. And that isn't the funnest thing in the world to do, so I usually avoided it, until audition day or performance day arrived, at which point I totally regretted it and wished I had done more. Of course, there's a lot more to performance practice than just run-throughs, and the kind of performance practice that athletes and top performers engage in is way more interesting too. If you'd like specific tips on how to do more performance practice and go into your next performance with more confidence, I put together a free 7-day practice course called Pressure Proof, where you'll not only learn several practice strategies that optimize learning, but a few performance practice strategies that will help you perform more optimally as well. Check out the sign-up link in the description below.